My name is Jessica. I am 28 years old, and right now I am sitting in the sleek glass office of the most promising tech startup in the city, feeling my stomach twist into painful knots as the CEO walks through the door. I was desperate for this job, counting pennies just to afford the bus ride here. But all that desperation vanished the second I looked at the man offering me the position. It was Arthur, now a 28-year-old successful man, but who used to be the quiet boy I relentlessly bullied and humiliated every single day in high school 10 years ago. He is looking right at me, his eyes holding a quiet power that completely strips away my adult facade, leaving me trapped in a silent panic as he slowly opens my resume and 10 years ago, life was a completely different game, and I arrogantly thought I was the undisputed winner of it all. I was the captain of the cheerleading squad, completely blind to anyone outside my perfect circle. Arthur was the exact opposite of everything my toxic teenage mind valued. He was incredibly skinny, always wore a faded blue jacket 2 sizes too big, and had a severe stutter. Instead of ignoring him, I made the conscious, wicked decision to make him my favorite daily target. I remember the exact moment I crossed the line into being genuinely cruel. We were in our senior year biology class, and Arthur had spent weeks building an incredibly detailed diorama. I deliberately bumped my hip into his desk, watching his fragile project crash to the linoleum floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. The classroom went dead silent. I just let out an obnoxious laugh, called him a clumsy loser, and walked away, completely intoxicating myself with that twisted sense of power. For the rest of our senior year, I never once apologized to him. I just continued to parade around the school with my friends, completely convinced that my actions had absolutely no real consequences. I honestly believed that the real world would just be an effortless extension of high school, where my pretty smile and popular status would magically open every single door for me. I was living in a pathetic, delusional fantasy, completely unaware of the massive storm that was quickly approaching. Life has a brutal way of balancing the scales, though. Shortly after graduation, my father lost his job, our family spiraled into severe debt, and my superficial popularity meant nothing. I had to drop out of college to help my family survive. My older sister, Sarah, who was 31 years old, took on 2 exhausting waitressing jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I remember crying on the floor of our tiny shared bedroom, realizing how utterly useless my high school status was in the real world. For the next 5 agonizing years, my reality was a brutal cycle of dead-end jobs. I worked long retail shifts, cleaned corporate offices late at night, and dealt with entitled customers who treated me like garbage. Every time someone yelled in my face, I felt a sharp sting of karma, wondering if this was how Arthur felt. Sarah became my absolute rock, constantly telling me that my past mistakes did not have to define my future, but I had to work tirelessly to prove I had truly changed. There was one specific night that broke me completely. I was scrubbing the sticky floors of a corporate restroom at 2 in the morning, my back screaming in agony, when a wealthy executive walked in, looked at me with absolute disgust, and deliberately dropped his wet paper towel right next to the trash can. I had to get on my hands and knees to pick it up. In that humiliating, lonely moment, Arthur's face flashed vividly in my mind, and I finally understood the true agonizing cost of cruelty. That is exactly why this specific administrative assistant interview meant absolutely everything to me. The starting pay at this fast-growing software company was enough to finally get Sarah and me out of our suffocating debt. I spent weeks preparing, scraping together my meager savings to buy a cheap but professional-looking suit from a thrift store. I rigorously practiced my interview answers in front of our cracked bathroom mirror every night until my voice went hoarse from pure anxiety. The morning of the interview, Sarah gave me a massive hug, telling me how incredibly proud she was of the resilient woman I was becoming. Her words gave me a false confidence that completely shattered the moment I stepped into the massive glass lobby of the tech company. I managed to pass the initial screening with the human resources manager, a kind woman who seemed genuinely impressed by my gritty work ethic. She confidently told me I was a top candidate, making my heart soar with wild hope. She then explained that the absolute final step was a brief meeting with the founder and CEO, a brilliant visionary who started this entire operation from scratch in his garage. I felt a huge surge of admiration, completely unaware of the devastating collision course destiny had set up for me. The manager led me to a massive glass office at the end of the hall. I sat there in the heavy silence, nervously smoothing out my thrifted skirt, taking deep breaths to calm my violently racing heart. Then the heavy door handle slowly turned. A tall, impeccably dressed man walked into the room, radiating quiet, undeniable authority. He did not wear a faded blue jacket anymore, and his posture was perfectly straight. But the moment our eyes locked, the terrifying recognition was instant and earth-shattering. It was Arthur, the stuttering boy whose biology project I had cruelly destroyed. He stopped dead in his tracks, his dark eyes widening slightly as he read my name on the folder. My mouth went uncomfortably dry in an instant. A cold sweat broke across my forehead, and my hands started shaking uncontrollably. I desperately wanted the polished floor to magically open up and swallow me whole, but I was entirely frozen in my chair, paralyzed by my own sickening guilt. Arthur walked around the large oak desk and sat down heavily opposite me. He deliberately opened my file, his handsome face terrifyingly unreadable. The heavy silence was absolutely deafening. The office itself felt like a high-tech fortress designed to expose every single one of my flaws. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view of the sprawling city below, making me feel incredibly small and entirely insignificant. The faint, rhythmic ticking of a modern silver clock on the wall sounded like a heavy judge's gavel striking a wooden block, counting down the agonizing seconds until he would finally speak and unleash the furious vengeance I absolutely deserved. He looked down at my printed resume, then slowly looked back up at me. He absolutely did not stutter when he spoke. His voice was incredibly clear and painfully strictly professional. He began asking detailed questions about my previous cleaning jobs, completely ignoring the massive elephant in the room. Every polite question felt like a jagged dagger twisting in my stomach. He was effortlessly treating me with the basic human dignity I had maliciously denied him. It was a brutal punishment. I clumsily stumbled through my rehearsed answers, my shaky voice barely registering above a broken whisper. I was entirely consumed by the vivid memory of my teenage cruelty, mentally replaying every nasty insult I ever threw at him. Finally, after what felt like an absolute eternity in hell, he closed the folder. He looked deeply into my terrified eyes, and a tiny flicker of raw emotion crossed his face. He softly asked me why I truly wanted to work for his specific company. I absolutely could not take the ridiculous charade anymore. My carefully constructed professional facade completely crumbled, and the heavy tears I had been desperately fighting spilled hot and fast over my cheeks. I choked back a painful sob and honestly told him I did not know how to adequately answer that question right now. I looked him straight in the eyes, stripping away every ounce of my pride, and genuinely apologized. I told him I was incredibly sorry for the monster I was back then. I absolutely did not make any pathetic excuses or blame my toxic teenage friends. I fully owned every single ugly thing I ever did to him. I tearfully told him that seeing him sitting there so successful while I was begging for a chance was the most profoundly humbling moment of my existence. I told him I completely understood if he wanted to throw me out right this second. I just desperately needed him to know that I carry the sickening shame of how I treated him every single day. Arthur sat there in absolute stunned silence for a very long time. He slowly leaned back in his leather chair, letting out a heavy sigh that truly seemed to carry 10 painful years of unresolved history. He quietly told me that my relentless bullying had left deep, lasting scars. He bravely confessed that it took him years of intense therapy just to stop hearing my cruel laughter echoing in his head every time he tried to speak in public. Hearing that made me feel physically, violently sick. But then he leaned forward again, gently tapping his index finger on my resume. He firmly told me that he had also carefully read about my severe struggles over the last few turbulent years. He saw the positive references from night shift managers who praised my unrelenting work ethic. He calmly said that the arrogant girl who destroyed his project would never have taken those degrading cleaning jobs, nor would she have cried openly in front of him begging for unearned forgiveness. Arthur firmly told me he was absolutely not going to hire me because he felt sorry for my financial situation, and he was certainly not going to reject me for a fleeting sense of petty revenge. He proudly said his company was built on personal growth, and he genuinely believed people could evolve if given a real chance. He offered me the job right there on the spot. He told me the starting salary, slowly stood up from his desk, and extended his right hand toward me in profound peace. I stood up on incredibly shaky legs, tentatively reaching out and firmly shaking his warm hand. I could not stop crying, overwhelmed by a chaotic mixture of profound relief, massive gratitude, and a deeply painful shame. Walking out of that massive glass building, the cold city air hit my tear-stained face, and I felt reborn. I immediately called Sarah, completely sobbing as I frantically told her everything. She cried right along with me, joyfully calling it my hard-earned second chance. Over the past few months working here, Arthur has treated me with nothing but absolute professional respect, and I work significantly harder than anyone else in this building just to prove his incredible mercy was not wasted on me. I learned the absolute hardest way possible that true power is not found in maliciously tearing people down, but in having the immense grace to lift them up when they least deserve it. It is a harsh lesson written in deep shame, but his unbelievable kindness truly saved my life. Would you have been capable of showing that much mercy to someone who completely tormented you in the past? Until the next story.